Good morning. I'm Darren Montero with California Dairies Incorporated. And other than dairy processing facilities and farms, transportation may be at the top of the list of importance to our daily business. Transportation moves raw milk to plant, products plant to plant, finished goods to consumers, and goods for export. Additionally, dairy farms are leading the way in supplying transportation with renewable natural gas, an alternative to fossil fuels, which makes our next speaker a great addition to our agenda today. I would like to welcome and thank Chris Shimoda for joining us today. He is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the California Trucking Association. He has been with CTA since 2007 and has expertise with multiple California agencies, including California Air Resources Board and California Highway Patrol, on the development and implementation of programs and regulations impacting the trucking industry. Like previously stated, if you have any questions, please type those into the chat. Chris, the stage is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Darren. And thank you so much to the California Creamery Operators Association for the invitation to be with you today. We're virtual, but hope to meet you all in person soon, maybe next year. And hopefully we'll have some of these issues cleared up by that point in time. But as Darren mentioned, I'm going to go through kind of a high-level update of issues related to the trucking industry. Have some slides here for you today. And do feel free to put any questions into that chat stream, and we will try to leave some time to get to those as well. And so a couple of main issues that we'll cover today is, no secret that we're having some pretty major export and domestic capacity challenges, and we'll talk a bit about that and some of the state responses, state as well as industry responses to those. Assembly Bill 5, the independent contractor worker classification test that was adopted in 2018. We'll talk about the Trucking Association's ongoing efforts to prevent that law from going into place here in the state of California and what that means to you all and your operations, as well as some upcoming major environmental regulations that, again, will have a major impact on your ability to procure transportation services in the way that you do today. So let's start on the export side. Don't know to what extent your membership does engage in, international trade or not, but was asked to just touch on some of the challenges that exporters are having, this year, specifically getting containers out of California to their international customers. And so, I am by no means an expert in this particular area, but have been following the issues related to the port for a long time, do lots of work with our both port and rail facing members. And what you really are seeing right now is a confluence of a bunch of different issues that have been bubbling to various levels over the better part of, several decades, all coming together at once to create this perfect storm situation. That picture you see right there on the screen is something, if you've ever been to Long Beach and go along some of the shorefront roads there, in times like this, I've seen it before in labor disputes with regards to the longshoremen's contracts, but this is another period where if you go out to Long Beach right now, what you're going to see is just ships, stacked up at like a parking lot in the harbor. And, this is all related to backups that are being created, again, by not just one single event, but really a confluence of different factors. There were disruptions to the on-port labor pool related to COVID-19. There were a lot of longshore labor that had been impacted by the virus at any given time that had, sort of started some of the backup. There was a consumer demand surge with folks shifting consumer spending away from, things like travel and entertainment and dining to getting on Amazon and ordering things, getting new patio furniture and furnishings for the homes, which really created a huge surge in demand for Asian imports. Industry consolidation, for those folks who are in the export side, obviously you're living with this every day that these steamship lines have consolidated. We no longer have any American flagged steamship lines at this point in time, other than, a few niche Jones Act carriers. And that's being reflected in these blank sailings that are occurring. Ships skipping over the typical calls for export loads out of Oakland and getting back to Asia to pick up more empty containers for those imports. And so, a confluence of all these various issues are really creating this, again, perfect storm situation. I know within our association, one of the big focuses during times like this are, where are the incentives aligning for the steamship lines to, put more investment into capacity, put more investment into the labor pool to get those docks cleared. And we continue to have concerns with the existing per diem and demurrage structure where, under normal circumstances, container free time, as you all know, serves as an incentive for shippers and truckers to be efficient with the steamship lines, containers, chassis, et cetera. But during times like this, where you are facing blank sailings or inability to get appointments or, just an absolute inability to pick up a container on the import side, those charges really don't serve any purpose from an efficiency standpoint and simply become a revenue generation opportunity for the steamship line and does not give them any incentive to invest in further efficiency. And so, all of those issues are ongoing and acute. And I know that the ag shipping industry nationally at the federal level are making some pretty big pushes on the Shipping Act to try to resolve some of these issues. And believe me when I say that the trucking industry is sharing those same concerns. Broadly, from a truck capacity standpoint, I know that it's not just on the export side, but also domestic transportation that is feeling the crunch. We sort of like to take a look at what's happening nationally. And again, talking to folks who procure transportation services every day, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But just as an example of what's happening right now with truck capacity nationally, with everybody competing amongst the various sectors for the same trucks, the spot market, as you can see from a year-over-year time frame, is up 300%, which means that folks are scrambling to try to procure additional trucks. The van to load ratio for 2021 so far, you can see, is way above where we were in 2019, which was kind of a status quo down sort of year from the trucking perspective. But that trend that began really immediately after the first couple of months of the pandemic, where you started seeing restocking from the panic buying period, a lot of again increased consumer demand, as well as several other factors, just really blew out that van to load ratio to the point where, where we are today nationally, there's 6 loads for every truck. So that's just a reflection of the tight capacity situation that we're in right now. So in response to specifically issues raised related to the upcoming harvest season, and I know that this is not necessarily applicable for this association, but as a reflection of what some of the state response has been to some of these issues, the Transportation Secretary just this past Thursday sent a letter to the board president of the Board of Food and Agriculture in response to a letter that was sent in May related to lack of availability of drivers for this upcoming harvest season. The Transportation Secretary did notify the Board of Food and Ag that temporary, it's a 60-day window where they will be allowing temporary 8,000 pound allowances, up to 88,000 pounds on a temporary basis via special permit, that they will be issuing those again for the next 60 days through the end of August in response to lack of drivers to work harvest. There is a section that I pulled out here in this box that I did want to note. I think that this is a reflection of generally how the state views these sort of requests is, number one, it's got to be done in response to a perceived emergency, which, the extremely seasonal, time-sensitive nature of harvest is viewed as. And also that, the Transportation Secretary made the point that they see this as a longer-term sort of systemic issue related to, lack of truck capacity for ag harvest, and that they don't necessarily want to see this done on a regular basis, and that they're looking to engage other state agencies to have those discussions. And so this is being done just through the end of August, specific to these commodities. I would reach out, or have your association and government affairs folks reach out to see exactly what the applicability of that temporary permit is going to be. Okay, and so speaking of capacity, I did want to raise an ongoing fight that the California Trucking Association is involved in. And this is related to, again, Assembly Bill 5 that was done back in 2018 that created a new worker classification test for independent contractors. And at this point in time, we are at the phase where we are going to be petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court for review of some of the lower court decisions in this case. Now, why should you care as, potentially someone who does not run trucks? This really gets to the question of 70,000 independent truckers who operate in the state of California currently. I don't have an exact number of what percentage of the overall capacity that these independent truckers make up, but believe me when I say it is a sizable number. We sort of estimate somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 20% of the overall capacity is single truck owner operators. And so, especially in seasonal applications or applications where you have, sort of spurts in demand, independent contractor truckers are key to making sure that there is available capacity. And so, again, we are headed to the U.S. Supreme Court on this issue. A preliminary injunction that the CTA won in January of 2020 is going to remain in place pending our application for review at the U.S. Supreme Court. You're probably wondering what this, weird black and white thing is here. I'd be remiss, and I apologize to Darren for not running this by you before, but, we are looking for support as we move forward in our fight to the U.S. Supreme Court. For any of you who have been in the business of having to pay attorneys, you do know that these sort of fights are not cheap. This is a QR code that if you open up your camera on your phone, this will take you to a link to our efforts to fundraise for this fight. We do expect that we're going to be spending another, let's say $1.5 to $2 million seeking review before the U.S. Supreme Court. And, again, why should you care? At the Creamery Operators Association, if you are having capacity issues and procuring transportation services today, believe me when I say that 70,000 owner operators suddenly, disappearing from the state of California is going to have a huge negative impact on you. So if you do have any questions about that case or what's happening in it, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions on it. Okay, and then I'll try to run through this as quickly as possible so that we have time for Q&A. So did want to touch on some of these major environmental regulations that are pending before the Air Resources Board. I know Darren had mentioned, the dairy industry's investment in renewable natural gas. And, this sort of speaks to the direction of the state of California and the ability to recoup, your investments over a longer term. in that technology. And so what the Air Resources Board is currently proposing is something called the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation. It is due before the Air Resources Board in December. And this proposal would touch a lot of pieces of your operations, potentially on the export side. There's a separate proposal for drayage fleets, the trucks that take containers to and from the ports, as well as high priority fleets is defined. And we'll get to that definition in just a second. And this is a regulation that is trying to respond broadly to Governor Newsom's executive order last year, which called for the phasing out of the internal combustion engine, both on the light duty side, as well as in the ports. By the year 2035, the governor would like to see no more internal combustion engine powered trucks. And then by the year 2045, for all other trucks where feasible. And so the drayage portion of this regulation, again, is seeking to transition all Class 7 and 8 drayage trucks, and that's really everything that does export, at the, be it the ports of LA and Long Beach or Oakland. So they are looking to get all of those trucks transitioned to zero emissions by the year 2035. If you do any domestic transportation by rail, trucks that go to the Class 1 rail yards would also be included in this regulation. And so, not to get super far into the weeds, but, essentially what CARB is proposing is to require all new trucks seeking to service the ports and rail yards beginning in 2023 to be zero emissions. But then they would grandfather in the existing diesel and natural gas fleet until they hit either the greater of 13 years from the date that their engine was certified. So for instance, a 2020 certified engine would be good until 2033. Or if they are low mileage trucks, you could keep those in for a bit longer. But basically, they're trying to grandfather in the existing truck fleet, and then they'll fall off as they hit these age markers. Okay, and high priority fleet. So this is for the rest of the state, all of your domestic movement other than ports and rail. So the definition of a high priority fleet. So this is going to be either, your own operation to the extent that you run trucks, or the folks that you engage with, be it motor carriers or brokers or whomever, you're procuring their services from. There's a $50 million national annual revenue marker that if you operate at least one Class 2B or higher truck, you would fall under this definition. Any fleet with 50 or more trucks, any broker that dispatches 50 or more vehicles. So it's a pretty broad definition. Pretty much anybody in the freight space is going to fall under one of those three lines. And so what is being proposed as of March of this year is extremely expansive. There is a percentage phase-in proposal that the Air Resources Board is proposing for fleets to turn over to zero-emission vehicles. And what started as a discussion about primarily smaller class vehicles doing local delivery has expanded to even sleeper cab tractors. As you can see here, having a requirement to transition over to zero emission vehicles as early as 2030. Your typical day cab, which is going to be doing a lot of your, I think the movements that were described by Darren and the type of transportation that you're procuring as early as 2027. And so this is the proposal that staff is working on to create draft language for. If they are going to make that December board hearing date, we would expect to see draft rule language here in the next couple of weeks. If they do not, think they're going to make that date, that may slip a bit. But this is a very live proposal. I would take this extremely seriously. Again, if you don't specifically own trucks, but you do procure transportation services, this is going to fundamentally change the way that the trucking industry operates. The diesel truck has been the workhorse of the freight industry for decades now. extremely long range, very energy dense fuel that can go, pretty much anywhere it's asked to. We are quite a ways away from being able to, do the same level of service that you're accustomed to in the supply chain with zero emission vehicles in all of these applications. There are some which are showing much more promise. Again, these smaller class vehicles that really return to home base, have limited range, weight is not an issue. But, suffice to say, sleeper cab tractors are not there yet. And we're still having discussions with the Air Board, about what the future of this rule is going to be. And, would highly recommend folks to get engaged now at this point in time. And so with that, happy to take any questions. My email is here. Feel free to reach out if you do have any questions or thoughts on any of these issues or questions we didn't get to. But otherwise, I'll just hand it back to Derek for Q&A.
Chris, thanks for that. I don't see a question on the board, but in the meantime, I'll ask one. In dairy, the bulk of our transportation is raw milk movement from farm to plant, typically kind of a max payload load, short haul, but those trucks are working 20 to 22 of the 24 hours in a day, right, with multiple drivers. So when do you think a zero emission truck would be ready for that kind of application where charge time is limited and hauls are heavy, but the hauls are short? What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be a while, because we typically talk about zero emission trucks and the challenges associated with them in a couple of buckets, and I think you hit those. Is range may not be an issue, right? It could be a short haul. Weight. We're seeing on the Class 8 demonstration tractors anywhere from a 6,000 to 8,000 pound weight penalty. And so if you are regularly, hitting that 80,000 pound limit, you're going to reduce the payload pretty significantly, with that electric truck as it stands today, right? I mean, the manufacturers are doing everything they can to lightweight these things. The battery technology is getting, more energy dense, and therefore you can put in a smaller battery pack at a certain point in time, but we're just not there yet on those demos. And those are, things that have like let's say a 200 mile range to be charitable to them at this particular point in time. The other issue is if you are running them that intensely, you don't have a long period of time to charge. The charger capacity, I'm learning more about this stuff every day, is really, sort of maxed out at current technology around a 200, let's say a 200 to 350 kilowatt charger, which means that for those trucks I just described that are already 6,000 to 8,000 pounds more heavy, it's going to take you anywhere from, let's say an hour to 2 hours to recharge that truck to, get another 150 to 200 mile range. And when you are charging that quickly, you also run into things with electric utilities like demand charges, time of use charges, depending on when you're trying to refill, that can end up really blowing out the costs, the assumed low cost of electricity that you had before then. And so, it's going to be a while before I think we see a truck that's going to be able to do that duty cycle you just described in a way that's going to make any sense for the business.
Additionally, I know California Dairies tried to kind of intervene a little bit in some trucking legislation, trying to increase kind of the weight limits to try to add some flexibility and feasibility back to that raw milk haul. What are your thoughts on kind of current weight limits and trying to match weight limits with neighboring states, especially for raw milk distribution, to try to make some of these hauls a little bit more economical?
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult. I mean, I've been with CTA for 14 years, and we've taken a couple of runs at increased size and weight. And generally speaking, they're just not successful due to the fact that, the existing infrastructure, California, as in most things, is ranked, near the bottom of our, grades from the folks who do the infrastructure assessments, be it pavement, bridges, you name it. They're all in a pretty poor state of repair right now. And so anytime you bring up increased size and weight legislation, you just run into that same argument that, our infrastructure can't handle it. But at some point with the coming mandates, be it electric trucks, be it, I know we're working on like a issue related to running double trailers with natural gas vehicles. We're actually over length when we're doing that right now. Something's got to give. The time old arguments of, well, the infrastructure can't handle it. It's like we got some, pretty major environmental challenges we're trying to be responsive to. If what needs to change is, let's say a 2 to 3 foot allowance on overall length to allow for a CNG truck to haul doubles, we'd say that that's probably less challenging than some of the, challenges coming from the other end of the spectrum on the, the state and its climate change goals. So, that's just been really the trend, and hopefully we'll see, that change as these mandates really start coming out.
Great. And then my last question is, as we're working on the supply side for renewable natural gas, what's one way the dairy industry could try to get some of your members engaged on the demand side to kind of convert some of their fleet over to renewable natural gas?
Well, I do know from our members, I think especially in the Valley, where there's been a good amount of outreach and incentive support put towards, RNG and ultra low NOx trucks, there's definitely been enthusiasm. Now, the biggest challenge that I think that you're going to have moving forward is this constant signal from the state that they intend to go zero emissions as quickly as possible. Reality and practicality be damned, right? And so, there really has to be, I think some certainty put in place for the industry about what is it that we should be investing in over the longer term, and that the position of the state, because, the Air Board, the Air Resources Board, as you know, is the only regulator in the country who can regulate mobile sources like trucks other than the EPA, and they have done so repeatedly. We really have to be responsive to where the ARB is signaling that they're going to go, and if they're saying, it's zero emission or bust, I mean, that is going to send a message, to the demand side as far as, where to put your money.
Great. Well, Chris, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us today. CDI, kind of understanding how important the CTA is to kind of our overall business, recently joined as an allied member. And I hope that more of you kind of consider CTA membership, as we all have kind of learned through this pandemic and otherwise that how important transportation is to our businesses, to our farms, our processing, and then to the consumers. So really want to appreciate that. And thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Darren. And thank you, everybody. Hope to see you all in person sometime soon.
With that, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, the Farm Service Agency Administrator, and he can discuss some of how the USDA is supporting American agriculture.